Welcome, everybody. The CISO series video chat is ready to begin.
Hey, everybody. It is David Spark, and welcome to the CISO series video chat. Many of you I've seen here many times before, and I greatly appreciate you coming back yet again. We are going to do another fun show for you today, and I've got some great guests for you. Today's topic is hacking cloud security myths, an hour of critical thinking of the truth and lies around securing a cloud environment. All right, who are our guests? Well, it'd be Mark Nunikoven, VP of Cloud Research with Trend Micro, and Marty Wilking, Global Head of Security and Technology Risk Management over at Wayfair. All right, our sponsor for today is Trend Micro. Thank you so much, Trend Micro, for sponsoring this. In fact, they have been a sponsor of all this content we're doing on this very topic of cloud security myths. In fact, I wrote a big article about this, of which I will talk about that later in the show. All right, for those of you who've been on here many times before, just bear with me as I burn through this. This is for all the new people who are joining us. 5 different ways you can participate. There is a chat room. You'll see it'll light up a lot. You can submit bad ideas on the topic of cloud security. I mean, it's cloud security myths. You could essentially come up with more myths if you'd like that you think are worse than the ones you've already heard. Join us on at any time on video with just typing in "Bring Me On" all in caps, and Andrew, the producer in the background, will just try to bring as many of you on as possible. And feel free to ask a question at any time, and we will try to answer as many of your questions as possible. Also, vote for your favorite question anytime, because if a lot come in, I'll need to know which one to go to first. Today's schedule: first 20 minutes questions, submit your bad ideas. At 20 minutes past the hour, a poll will go live, and you'll vote for your favorite bad idea. Now, I ultimately pick the grand prize winner of the bad idea, which you win one of these awesome fleeces right here, the CISO series fleece. I will also warn those of you who have won, we are severely backordered. I've been told that it may take until May till a lot of them are shipped out. So please, apologies. You'll probably get your vaccine before you get one of my fleeces. Then we'll play the Department of Yes. Normally we play Beat the Bad Idea. We're going to play the Department of Yes this time. Vote for your favorite questions after that. Then we'll play What's Worse. The winner of last week, Matthew Bybee, will join us to play What's Worse. He'll pick the 2 bad ideas. It'll go face to face. And then last question, the final advice. And then at the end of the hour, it's our icebreaker, which, again, if you've never been to it, it is a ton of fun. So please stick around for the icebreaker. All right. And lastly, I just want to mention that next Friday, which will be the 23rd, our topic will be hacking distractions, an hour of critical thinking of what we should stop paying attention to in security. This is going to be a fun topic, actually. The link at the very bottom of the screen, you see that big old sort of teal box, if you will. You can click on that at any time and join and essentially register for the video chat for next week. It will not take you out of this video chat at all, so don't worry about that. All right. Got all that information down. I'm trying to see how fast I can spit that all out, but it pretty much is 3 minutes each time that I have to do it. So I appreciate you sticking around. All right. Cloud security myths. I will just say this. I'm going to start with you, Mark, because we've talked a lot about this already. There are a lot of myths, and all I do is I see them mostly growing and very few going away. Would you agree with that statement?
100%. I think it's, given that we are 10 to 15 years into this whole cloud thing, the fact that these myths have continued to stick around, if not sort of embed themselves even stronger into our culture, is amazing, if frustrating. So it's absolutely the case that these myths continue to stick around, and some new ones pop up. But I think we've been, this core 20 to 30 have been here for a long time and are probably here to stay, which is unfortunate.
Marty, one of the cloud myths that amuses me the most are 2 completely conflicting myths, which are probably, I would say, the granddaddy, and I've discussed this with Mark before. Myth number 1, the cloud is not secure. Myth number 2, the cloud is secure. They're both myths. They're both bantied about. Why do you think those 2 exist, and can they coexist? Or maybe they shouldn't coexist at all, but what is the reality, and why do you believe those 2 are so strong? I mean, they're kind of at the top of the list there.
They are, and they've been around for a long time. I think there are a lot of assumptions that get made around getting an echo, so it's a little.
You're getting an echo of yourself?
I am.
Are you going through your own headphones?
I am.
Do you have your speakers on as well?
Maybe. Okay.
There you go.
That didn't help. All right. Well, we'll fix this in a minute. Those myths tend to exist. Like I said, they've existed for a really long time. I heard them 15 years ago, so when things got started. And I think there were a lot of assumptions at the time that were perpetuated by some of the larger institutions around, we don't want to put our data in there because it's really scary. And oh my God, the data could be anywhere. It could go to China and nobody would ever tell us and we would never know. That's not true. And then there were other people who kind of looked at it, particularly like smaller institutions, who went, oh, if I just put everything in there, it'll all be secured because they told me it would be, right? So I think they persist because there's still those assumptions that are being made. The truth is really somewhere in the middle. There are a lot of really good inherent security measures within the cloud that the cloud providers have really gotten better about providing over the years. It's not automatic, but in some cases it's a lot easier than it is if you're doing colo, right? So if you're trying to run your own data center and trying to set up encryption, you have to set up all of the mechanisms that support all of that encryption. If you're in the cloud, you have some options to add some of those native services within your cloud, and you get the security. You still have to do the work, though. It doesn't absolve you of actually having to do some of the work. It's just a little less work in some cases. So yeah, I think those are going to continue to be around because I think people still believe both sides of that truly. But really the answer is yes, it can be easier. Yes, it does exist, but you do still have to do some work to actually make it happen. So,
by the way, my advice to you, Marnie, if you were still hearing the double audio, is don't tap on that where we hear that whenever you do that. Just refresh your browser, and that may solve the double audio. I'll go to Mark right now. Mark, so Marnie brings up a really good point here, and I'm going to get to the questions very, very soon. But one of the points she brings up is if you go to the cloud, it resolves the need to do issue number one, and you don't need to set up your own colocation, and you don't have to set up your own encryption, but it creates these other issues. So in the simplest terms, and I know it's far more complex, but just give me the sort of the basic of when you go to the cloud, you no longer have to do this, but now you have to do that.
Sure. I would say when you go to the cloud, you no longer have to worry about the low level stuff. You get to focus on the high level stuff. So you don't have to worry about, the mechanics of how your data center works. You don't have to worry about, cabling your networking. Like a lot of this low level stuff that you don't necessarily think about day to day, but is absolutely critical, is the cloud provider's responsibility. And that lets you focus on things like making sure permissions and access control are set up and set up well, right? Because I think that's probably the biggest challenge most people are facing, whether they acknowledge it or not, is that, permissions are really hard. They get easier in the cloud, but they still have a bunch of work. So, I mean, the core is you lose some of that low level stuff. That gives you time to focus on that higher level stuff, which, you've been trying to spread yourself too thin. And really the big advantage for moving into the cloud means you can focus on smaller areas. There's still a mountain of work to do, but at least it's more focused as opposed to trying to cover everything.
All right. So, and Larry, by the way, is asking the essentially the granddaddy myth that we've heard before. But I think we should just address it, and let's not waste too much time on this. But Mark, I'll go to you. How do you answer the question? How do you actually answer the myth question of cloud security is always inherently weaker than on-premise systems?
Yeah, and this one pops up surprisingly still. I mean, I answered this all the time early days because it was a new thing, right? Cloud was new. People were like, what do you mean I'm trusting my provider with this, that, and the other thing? But I would say, I always say, I want to say the exact opposite, but I know that doesn't work when people are coming with that attitude of like, hey, it's inherently less secure. I would say all things being equal, look at it this way. You have your cloud service providers team focusing on the physical, the infrastructure, as well as most of the time the operating system level of stuff, at least the virtualization layer. And they're focusing on that exclusively, and they live and die by reputation. Mm-hmm. That leaves you to focus on that OS, the apps, and the data, and then that service config. So even if things were equal, and even if it was true that it was a little less secure, it's not, but even if you assume it was, doesn't it make more sense that you're going to have a better security outcome with a world-class cloud provider team focusing on half the work and letting you focus on the other half? And that normally kind of gets people a little past that assumption and that myth. But it is challenging when people come with that assumption that they're correct already and that, hey, it's less secure. Been my experience working with organizations around the world that you can end up being more secure because of that division of labor and getting another team to take that off your hands, and because they're held accountable through that reputation. Because if you're with Cloud A, one of the A's, you can always go to Cloud G if you don't like the if something bad happens or if one of them had a major breach, which they've never had. So it's I think that's how I tackle that one now, and it's hit or miss because a lot of the time the people aren't necessarily looking for a fact-based response. They're either looking for reassurance of what they already feel to be true, or they're trying to defend their jobs because maybe they're a VP of infrastructure and infrastructure is going bye-bye and it's not so good for them career path.
And that actually is one of the things I've seen also is there are people who are afraid to go to the cloud because I think you're right. They're afraid to let go of that territory. And it's there's a change management, a people change management piece here. You still have to have people helping run your infrastructure. That doesn't necessarily go away. It's a different skill set. So if you can help those people upskill and they recognize that they need to upskill to do the same job in a different environment, you can actually help with that argument as well.
All right. Hey, just a couple of things I want to quickly mention. I got another question I want to go to. Please don't forget to register for next week's video chat by clicking on the link at the bottom of the screen. And I don't know what the validity to this statement is by Craig, but I think the second part valid. But you know what? You tell me yay or nay here on the validity, because I think there is some. Craig says security has created much of the fear-mongering around the security state of the cloud. Agree or disagree with that? Just quickly. Yay or nay? What do you think?
Yes, I do agree with that.
Okay. So how should a security group take on repairing the gap that they have created? I'll start with you, Marnie.
I think it goes back to, I think the reasons behind it go back to what Mark just said about some people being afraid for their jobs. I think security people feel like they want to make sure that they hold on to that special security job, which is true. And we will all have jobs. I look at the security skill gap in a little bit different way, and that we need to educate everybody. Like I want to do the fun stuff. I don't want to do the regular day-to-day ticket answering security stuff. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that does in fact get put back on the cloud providers. A lot of that basic stuff is being handled by them. So when you do that, you do actually get to do more of the fun stuff. You get to do the threat analysis. You get to actually look at like your full cloud architecture and say, where do I actually need controls, as opposed to making assumptions about, oh my gosh, I have to have all of this defense in depth and I have to have all the tools. Maybe you don't anymore. And it gives you an opportunity to really rethink how you're doing security and do it in a better way.
All right. More questions are coming in. By the way, please feel free. And let me give you, we have 6 minutes before we put the poll up. So do me a favor. If you have a bad idea, of which I've seen plenty already, get them in the next 6 minutes to be considered for our next game. And also, if any of you would like to join us on camera, have a question or a comment on this issue, please don't hesitate. And I like this one from Ian. So just type "bring me on." So Ian Pointer asked this one, of which I also asked you this one, Mark, and I'll ask you it again. What myths or unknown truths do you think do the most damage to our ability to use or secure the cloud? So it could be one of that list from 30 that I published or something else. What do you think is the most damaging one? Like, if let me say it this way. If it became a hardcore belief, it would be the most damaging. Which one?
Yikes. It's a hard one. Honestly, it's challenging because I think that a lot of them in the list in the article, and if you haven't read the article, everyone absolutely check it out.
I
And
put the link in there.
yeah, read the original first and then read the update, because it's amazing how little has changed, but also how much has changed. So I don't know if I'd pick one, but I think, if I'll pick something a little out there, because we haven't talked about it yet, would be the myth around, data sovereignty and geolocation of the data. Where people are like, no, I can't put this stuff in the cloud because I have these data requirements. And I've worked in jurisdictions around the world, and very few of them have broad, like, you must keep your data within country. And most of the time, they've been updating those as well. So, as long as your encryption keys are under your control in the country, then there's validity there. But I think that, and I know, obviously I've been speaking for a while, so people have probably figured out that I'm a Canadian by now, that in Canada, that actually set back cloud adoption significantly, because people were under the belief in corporate Canada that, hey, we can't go to the cloud because of our privacy legislation won't allow us to. And that simply wasn't true. It was never true. It never will be true, most likely.
No, all the data has to exist in both English and French, right?
Yeah, well, that one's closer to the truth, but it was this huge thing where these companies were continuing, is even 5 years ago, we're continuing to make these massive investments in data centers to build out capacity that they may need for a false belief that they had to keep their data in country, and these weren't even in highly regulated industries. So I think that one, I've seen the damage firsthand, and while there's a ton of myths that have damage, I think that one's done an untold amount of real damage to corporations spending a lot of money in their limited budgets where they don't have to.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask the same question to you, Marty. Which, and it could be any one that you've seen or one from the list, but what myth of cloud security do you think is the most damaging? And by the way, excellent answer, Mark. I like that.
Oh, that's a lot of pressure on me.
Yeah, you have to be. By the way, you do have to be better than Mark.
Right.
Not hard.
I think the myth that the cloud provider will take or not take, right? Again, both of these exist, responsibility for a breach that happens, right? And that goes to the shared responsibility model. And I think people really misunderstand that shared responsibility model, either to the extent that they think, oh, the cloud provider is going to take all the responsibility off of me, and so therefore I'm transferring the risk, or other people interpret it as,
are you
I have to
transferring
take it.
any of the risk?
There's some physical security risk that you are transferring, which happens in a colo environment also. There's, I would say, no, actually. There's some amount, again, so shared responsibility has some amount there, but they're really responsible for keeping the lights on. So there's just the data center piece that you're transferring, just like you would in an on-prem. The difference is they have done more modeling around different compliance models, right? So there's a shared responsibility model, but there's also a shared responsibility model for HIPAA specifically, and there's a shared responsibility model for PCI specifically also. And so you need to know what space you're in, and you need to know what they're going to do for you and what they're not going to do for you. So, and again, I think people take either one of those and sort of go to the extreme with it. And, oh my God, we're transferring all the risk. Oh my God, no, we're taking on all of the risk. Neither one of those is true. And you really need to spend the time understanding what that shared responsibility model looks like. And they will help you, but it will make your life a lot easier if you understand what things you are still on the hook for and how they can actually help you get that done.
All right.
Can I jump in on that, David, real quick?
Please.
Yeah, I would say the simple way, simple big quotes around that one, that I always look at it is that you are always taking on all the risk. You're delegating mitigation to the cloud service provider. But at the end of the day, it's your data, and it's always your data. And that's really what you're trying to protect. All these systems and all that kind of stuff, it's all window dressing on top of that data. And you're always responsible for the data. And while you get the CSPs to do workaround stuff and you're getting them to apply specific risk mitigations, it's still your risk because it's your data.
But hold it. Let me qualify this. Yes, you're taking on the risk, but could you say, I'm still taking on the risk? It's my risk. It's my data. but I'm minimizing the risk because I've shifted a portion over here. I haven't eliminated the risk by any stretch, but I've minimized it because this element of this is now off of my hands. And like what you said, Marnie, it's like the less fun stuff is now off my hands. So that makes my life a lot easier. And not only that, I was talking to Nir Rothenberg yesterday about this, and he said, once you hire a cloud, you're now hiring all these engineers that are looking at your data along with everybody else's. I couldn't do that. I just couldn't. I don't have the money, something like that. Hey, my producer Andrew has just let me know that the poll is live. That means I want you to get your choices in. And by the way, go ahead, pick which one you want. Which will be the bad idea? All right. So, in about 10 minutes, we will be playing Department of Yes. So get those in. I like this question that came in from Eli, and this has to do. We're a bunch of security people talking about the cloud. But I'm interested to know from all the conversations you've had with C-level and board-level people, where is their understanding? Are they still in the myth world, or are they coming around? So this is Eli's question. Eli Migdal of Boardish, and he asks, from the non-technological decision makers' point of view, so the C-suites, the board, such, do you believe that they are expecting the cloud to provide security, or are they not going that deep about this subject at all? In essence, how does the concept of cloud security look from their point of view? So, we're all talking about this, but just interested, like in the conversations you had, where are they right now, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Marnie's going to give a much more, practical answer here because she's dealing with this level all the time. For me, I get little snippets of different orgs as opposed to an in-depth conversation. Right. But from my perspective, what I find interesting is I can normally tell if there's a sort of a traditionalist advocate within the company, depending on the response that comes from the C-level, because the default answer for most orgs is we are in the cloud or we need to be in the cloud because it's the cloud and that's where everyone's going. And that's sort of the level they just go, there's a big business advantage
or something like that.
Yeah. And they don't get into the depths of the security piece. They just go, it's better in the cloud. Let's go. Though occasionally I still hit across, and this comes right down to the heart of the myths, a company where, I'll talk to a CIO or a CEO or maybe even the CFO, and they're like, no, we can't go cloud. It's too risky. There's too many problems. It's just totally insecure. And at that point, I know it's not they're not the challenge. It's someone within the org who's, either in infrastructure or security that's digging in their heels because they don't want to go. But most of the time, I see it at that really high level of like cloud, and that you're like, okay, end of conversation, right on.
So from your experience, what are you experiencing, Marnie?
So it goes back to like both. There are people who believe both camps. Mark's right. Most of the time, there's been a business decision that, okay, we're going all in the cloud, and whether they understand what the security level is or not, they're just expecting me to do it. Like they expect that I know how to secure the cloud and that I'm taking care of it. And so
that's why we hired you, Marnie.
That's kind of it, actually. It's the questions that come up are, what do you need? Are we doing everything right? And that's my job. That's what the leadership expects me to do. We have had situations where, in various roles where leadership will say, well, I don't think we should go all in on one cloud because that's too risky. We should probably go into multiple clouds. And then it's clear that what they don't understand is like Google isn't just one big cluster in the sky somewhere. It's actually multiple data centers that we fail over between anyway. And, same with AWS. And so inherently at that point, it is actually better for us from a failover standpoint because we've got more options than maybe we had with a single colo data center. So there, that level of detail. And then I think one of the things that came up when you had a teaser video with Mark last week, the backup and disaster recovery scenario. So there's also the assumption, there's some assumptions that, oh my gosh, we shouldn't put all of our eggs in one cloud because if they go down, the whole, we're done. But there's also sort of an assumption of, well, if we're in the cloud, then the disaster recovery is all taken care of. And that's absolutely not true either. You still have to, again, that goes back to shared responsibility. You still have to set it up so that you have the ability to, if you want to do it quickly, you have to be able to fail over, which means you have to have some things ready to go. If you're okay setting everything back up, they'll get you space in their other data center. But, honestly, the other piece of that is if Google goes down, if AWS goes down, if Azure goes down, a whole lot of people are having a really bad day, and you might not be at the top of their priority list.
That's a really good point. Now, I want to get with 5 minutes. I want to cover just one topic, and that about shared responsibility. Let's talk what the high level is, because I generally understand what the high level is, but then there's also a lot of fine print about it. What at the high level can you explain to your C-suite what shared responsibility is, and to your security team, how do you explain shared responsibility? I'll start with you, Mark.
Sure. The interesting thing is I find with shared responsibility, the presentation of the CSPs themselves has been getting more and more complicated as we go.
Oh, really?
And I've been really trying to make it simpler and simpler, because I think that, when you make it more complicated, things get lost. But really, the way I explain it, the way I pitch it to people is, there's 6 main areas where people need to do daily work. So we've got physical infrastructure, virtualization, OS, applications, and data. Someone somewhere needs to be doing work in those areas every day. And in the old world on-prem, our company took on all those areas and we did all the work. When we move into the cloud, we take at least half of those. So we go physical infrastructure and virtualization. The CSPs do at least that. And the deeper we get into the cloud, then they take on OS and apps. And so we're responsible always for our data. And we're always responsible for service configuration, but depending on what piece of the cloud we're using, we may or may not be responsible for the apps and for the OS. And I think that kind of gets that concept across, right? So the more we go into one cloud and the better we are at leveraging that, the less of the boring work, or the unexciting work, as Marty's calling it, is what we're doing. But really what it is business focused. So the more we can dive into one cloud, the more we can get into those managed or high-level services, the more that our company, can focus on delivering business values and meeting those business objectives. And that at its heart is a shared responsibility model. And it doesn't mean that we from security just say, it's good, they're going to do everything. It means that we're going to double check their work as much as possible. But that's the goal here, is for us to do the least amount of generic work and the most amount of specific business work as possible, both from a development, operational, and security view. That's how I explain the model. I hope it made sense. I've used it a lot, so it better make sense, because someone should have told me years ago that didn't make sense if that's what I've been using. But that's how I go.
Nodding their head and going, yeah, okay, Mark.
I mean, that's my normal reaction when I'm in a room, so I don't differentiate if it's what I'm currently saying or just that I'm there. So, yeah.
Marty, do you do it any differently? And by the way, before you answer, just quickly, Matthew Bybee, please get your 2 bad ideas that are going to what's worse. Make sure you email those to Andrew within the next few minutes. Marty, go ahead.
I really like the way Mark explained that we get to focus on the business piece, and they continue to focus on keeping the underlying infrastructure running. And one of the questions I think that comes up periodically is, well, then why don't we just stay in a colo data center? Why are we even trying to move to the cloud? Because there are other pieces that come along with moving to the cloud, right? Most of the time you don't just want to do a lift and shift, because otherwise that myth about it's cheaper in the cloud goes away entirely. Comes to fruition, because if you're just doing a lift and shift, it is not going to be cheaper in the cloud. You actually have to do some work to optimize that. And so the question is, well, if we have to do all this extra work, why do we want to do that? A lot of companies don't need the scaling piece, but that's really the biggest benefit. One of the biggest benefits you get going into cloud is they do all of that scaling, not for you, but mostly for you. So there's that myth around, oh my God, if you need to scale up, it just magically happens, which I think we saw with Slack on January 4th, as I recall. Mm-hmm. But there's that capacity there, and they're promised that they will have that capacity for you as you continue to grow. And a lot of e-commerce firms have seen like exponential growth over the course of the past year as people sat at home and needed to order everything. And so having that capacity and knowing that that capacity is there for you, it, again, helps you focus on just the business, and you don't have to spend so many cycles figuring out, okay, by how much do I need to increase in capacity? How long do I need to increase the capacity? How quickly can I shut it down? The cloud service providers work with you closely on that, and it makes a big difference in the ease of use at that point.
Excellent. All right, we got a call that just came in.
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
Ah, yes, it is time to play the Department of Yes. And the way this works, as we know, security is notoriously known as the Department of No, where they reject good ideas. You will actually have to say yes to horrible ideas. And here's your very first one, which is voted up very much the number one bad idea here. What's Worse is in. Oh, wait, let me just quickly make sure that I'm not picking the What's Worse that Matthew picked. All right, it is not the one I'm going to pick. All right, so here it is. Promote that cloud security is mostly a legal issue and hand it off to the chief legal officer, achieving clean hands. I will start with you, Mark. Why do you want to deploy this?
Yes, I want to make this purely a legal issue. I'm going to hand it over to our legal team because honestly, I've been getting harassed from the CFO to buy a ton of cyber insurance, and I can't figure out for the life of me the practical value that how that's going to increase our security posture. So I am 100% yes behind this, because as it explodes in his face, I will finally eliminate the argument of getting this cyber risk, because they will not have the political capital to push this through. And we can continue to get back, or we can finally get back to doing the work of actually improving our security posture and realizing that, that cyber risk insurance may be good from a business
pointing
perspective.
Out that this is a bad idea. That's not what I wanted you to do. I don't want you to do.
Fair.
No, I didn't want you to point it out. It was a bad idea. We all know it's a bad idea.
I think it's a useful idea. It's useful. Even if it's bad, I'm going to find the positive in it and use it to my advantage.
How are you using it to your advantage?
To kill my cyber risk problem, right? I'm killing that insurance problem.
So you don't have to have a cyber risk. Yes! Okay. That's good. Marty, I'm going to you. Why do you want to embrace this horrible idea?
I think it's a fabulous idea to make general counsel completely responsible for all of the cloud security, because then I no longer have to report to the board. All of my risks go away, and I can still focus on.
But the thing is that it's a company that has the risk. They're just becoming responsible for the cloud right now. So it's not you personally never had the risk. They had the risk. You're just managing the risk, correct?
Managing it. I'm not following.
As a security person, your job is to manage the risks, not to take on the risk, right?
Well, yes. Yeah. So, but I'm also reporting on the risk. So if the general counsel is taking on all of the cloud security. So you don't have to report
on the risk anymore. That is actually something off your hand.
Yes, exactly. Takes a lot of work off my team.
Less work for you. We're all for that because you got enough as it is. All right. Let's go to another question. Let me make sure again. I do not want to take one of Matthew's because he's going to come out 45 minutes past the hour, and then okay, we'll come back to that. So let me just make sure that I don't take that one here. Oh, I like this one. Oh wait, let me just make sure. No, let's go with this one. Overload your SIM and the team with logs from every single cloud source. I'll start with you, Marnie, on this. Why do you want to embrace this? Just sort of pump that SIM with logs, cloud source logs.
That is a fabulous idea, because when you're in the cloud, you have no limitation on how many logs you can create and store. So everybody wants more and more and more data. And it's especially useful to do that when you haven't actually done a threat analysis, because now you have all of the information and you don't have to do the threat analysis. It's all just right there for you. The cloud will figure it out for you.
You may have to parse some of the data. So I'm going to give you both on that one. Mark, why are we going to flood the team with all of that?
Yeah, fantastic idea. Because finally, my security team is going to be looking at more than just security data. We're going to be looking at the contextual data for the rest of the business. We're going to see how everything is operating so that we're not just looking at our tiny little slice and going, the sky is falling or everything's fine, and not actually realize what's happening in the business. So this is a great idea because it finally provides the context that we need to make informed security decisions.
Sir, yes, sir. And that is the winning answer right there. Good job, Mark. Congratulations. All right, we have Dutch Schwartz wearing his unicorn t-shirt. Dutch, how many unicorn t-shirts do you own?
That's a great question. More than 20?
More than 20. Let me ask you. They have unicorn t-shirts your size, not just for teenage girls?
They do. Yeah, I have to get teenage girl triple XL, actually.
Okay. All right, what's your question or comment?
My question is, we talked a lot about the myths and why they persist. But I'd like to hear from both of you on what do we do to change that, right? We've kind of, gnashed our teeth and lamented about it, but as a group, what do we do to change the dialogue?
That's a good question. And let me add to that question. Since I had written about this 6 years ago, what would it take for me not to write the same article 6 years from now, Mark?
I think you're going to write the same article 6 years from now, but if we can live in a dream world for a minute, I think the biggest thing that's going to move this is getting security people familiar with the cloud. Even to this day, what I see constantly is people who just sort of have a bare minimum understanding of what it means. I think security as a general practice, we need to get our hands dirty in cloud. We need to be building stuff. We need to know what it means to have these fast iterations, how we're making rapid changes, because once we start to use it, then we'll understand it. And I think then we're going to stop perpetuating a bunch of these myths, because honestly, that's where I see most of these myths are coming out of the security teams, not the other teams. And I mean, there's exceptions there, but I think it's just rolling up our sleeves and getting in there and using it so that we can finally understand it.
Good answer, Marnie, you.
I think there are three things. One, we need to replicate Mark over and over and have everybody listen to him everywhere. Two, I agree with Mark, the getting your hands dirty, right? Historically, we haven't had a lot of developers on security teams. And if you want to move to the cloud and do it correctly, you need to write security as code and infrastructure as code, and you need to understand it. And the only way to do that is to make sure that your security team is getting in, actually understanding how to build things and how to do security as code.
Let me pause you for just a second, and I would love to get a quick answer, because I keep hearing that cloud architect is one of the most highly sought after jobs. Would the two of you say that the one area in cybersecurity that is most deficient yet still highly needed is cloud security? I don't know where we lost Mark there for a second. Is essentially cloud security knowledge and specific domain, AWS, Google, and Azure for that matter. Where did Mark go?
I'm still here. My camera just went out.
There we go. Back. All right. So I'll start with you, Marnie. Do you agree with that statement or no?
Yes. Yes, it is the cloud is one of the skill sets that we don't have a lot of in security. And so there's a gap. And so these roles are staying open. There are ways to fill that gap by educating, right, and doing what we just said. I think the other area that's deficient, though, and these two go hand in hand, is in the DevSecOps area. And again, it goes back to, we need more developers doing security, or we need more security people who can do development. And I think that's really the only way we're going to get there. And we can start to educate our, again, I said this earlier, we have to democratize security expertise. We can't hold that to ourselves all the time. That's not good for us, right? We used to have one person 40, 50 years ago. There was one person in the office who knew how to run the computer. We all carry them in our pockets, right? So now we all know how to run a computer. I need everybody to understand the basics of how security works so that they can help me. And again, then I get to still focus on the fun stuff and the new and emerging technologies and threats and things like that. So yes, I absolutely agree. And I think there are ways to do that and add that on to what our security experts already know.
And by the way, my mother has a computer in her pocket Good luck trying to explain all that to her as well. Mark, is cloud security one of, if not the top most deficient need in sort of the grand spectrum of security needs of staff? What do you think?
I think so, but I also think there's a problem with looking at it like that. I agree with Marnie that we've got to get it out there to everybody, and that's part of the problem is that we keep going for these specialized roles, and then we treat them as the everyday person. If you have someone who's a cloud security specialist, they should be pulled in when there's a real big problem or an edge case or something weird. The day-to-day configuration of a standard build in the cloud should be done by the team that's doing that build, right? And I always think of it like UX people, usability people, right? There's only so many of them in the development team, but everybody should be able to figure out how to make a button look like every other button. When they're building something out, right? And that's the same thing for security. The basics we need to teach and educate everybody on, so that when we do have these cloud security specialists or deep specialists, I'm going to camera too. Then we can figure out exactly what they can do and what they need to be doing.
All right. Oh, Jesus. I didn't really look at all this camera action you got going on. Dutch, does that satisfy you, those answers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think those are great answers, and I would generally agree that you have to get all employees to a base level of understanding. So when I talk with people, I talk about it as quality. If you think of it as quality, then people intrinsically understand we all need to do this. Everybody, we don't have secretaries. People don't need to go to somebody to hand a paper to somebody to type, because we all do it today, right? So we all need to understand, and it's not just don't click a phishing link. You need that. Don't get me wrong. That's important. That's just security awareness. We need security knowledge, and you need to train all employees, because it doesn't matter if the four of us don't click a link. It matters if Tim in the warehouse doesn't click a link.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the third point I was going to bring up earlier too is we have to inform. We have a responsibility as security leaders to inform our leadership as well. So when I go to the board and in having a discussion, it sounds like maybe they don't have all the information they need. It's my responsibility to give them that information and to follow up and to make sure that they understand. Because if you just give them a little piece of information and then say, oh, I did my job, they probably still don't understand. So making sure that they have the full context and helping leadership, helping the board, that level needs to understand this, because they're the ones funding it.
All right. I want to actually make a comment to or bring up Eli Migdal's follow-up question, because it has to do with what you just said, Marnie. And the question also would be, are you the one responsible here? He said, who is responsible to sell the cloud more deeply, cloud security to management? Is that your job, Marnie? I mean, is that your role?
So selling the cloud, probably not, but selling the fact that we can secure it, yes. That's okay. And I mean, honestly, my job is to secure whatever the business wants to do. Like my job is not to tell the business, that's a good security idea or that's a bad security idea. My job is to say, that's a really interesting idea. All right, we'll figure out how to secure it. That's what we're here to do.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to, by the way, I don't want your answer to this yet, but Chase Pettit has a great question for which I'm going to ask you later. So I'm going to give you some time to gel and to think about this. But Chase wants to know, what is a bizarre new cloud security myth that we can all start right now? All right. So don't answer yet. Be thinking about it, because I want a good answer later. Can we get Matthew Bibby on to play our game? Bybee. I'm sorry, I pronounced his last name incorrectly. Matthew Bybee. Can we get him on to play the What's Worse game? And while we're waiting for Matthew to come on, the link at the bottom of the screen, make sure you click on that to join us next week. Hacking distractions. We're all dealing with distractions, and comes in many different ways. It's a distraction of what can we stop doing in cybersecurity, and what else, how we get distracted by attackers as well. But here we go. Hold on, Matthew.
It's time to play What's Worse.
All right. Matthew is actually a multiple winner. I know you've won at least 2 times. Have you won more than 2 times, Matthew?
3, I think. Yeah.
3? Oh, 3. Very good. Very good. So that is the sweatshirt he's wearing from a previous winning. I should mention that people, when they win multiple times, they get an Amazon gift card. I don't just keep sending them sweatshirts, and so they can layer on top of each other. For that matter. All right, Matthew, you have 2 of the bad ideas that are going to go head-to-head here in the what's worse scenario. Please throw them to Mark and Marnie.
Okay, the first one is move all resources to the cloud and fire your security staff since the cloud provider will handle the security for you. And the second one is try to sell the on-premise is always safer approach on the same week a huge Exchange 0-day is published.
Ooh, good ones. All right, I will throw it to you, Mark. Mark, which one is worse?
I think on-prem. The same week as an Exchange 0-day is worse. Because normally on-prem is a hodgepodge of everything. So it's challenging to kind of run around and plug all the holes. With the cloud and then getting rid of the security staff, at least you've got an API to automatically recover or shut down or move, or you've got a little more utility for the few people that are left in the engineering team that have an idea what's going on. So I think it's worse on-prem just because of the lack of tooling. I think they're both horrendous, for the record.
Yes,
but
we all know they're both bad.
On-prem, I think, is going to be worse in this case.
It's, again, like I always say, the game is not ice cream or a sack of poop. It's, there are 2 different kinds of sack of poop. All right, Marnie. Which one's worse?
I'm going to agree with the on-prem, but for a little bit different reason.
Okay.
Mainly because I would be concerned if you sell it too hard, then the pendulum swings too far in that direction, and they start going, well, gosh, maybe we should bring all of our CRM on site, and maybe we should bring all of our financials back on-prem, and suddenly you have this onslaught of, oh my God, now we're running an entire company ourselves for things that we don't have core competency to do.
Excellent answers, both of you. Kudos. Matthew, thank you very much, and congrats on being a winner. All right, who will be the winner this week? We'll find out. All right, we've got, how much time we got left? We have 14 more minutes. Oh, by the way, and let me also remind everybody, we are going to do the one-on-one meetups at the end of this, and all 3 of us, and hopefully many more of you will be part of the one-on-one meetups. So what will happen is that link at the bottom, which is for next week's video chat, for which you should be clicking on now if you have not done that already. Please do that. That will change to our meetup link, and when we have 5 minutes left to go. All right. But we don't have a lot of time, so let's see how many more of these questions we can burn through. Oh, by the way, I am going to ask you what that cloud security myth is in a second, though. All right. This is an interesting question. Don asked this question. The cloud service providers can facilitate adoption better. They're really good at getting people on board fast. They're smart. That's a good sales technique. Companies do not understand what and how to manage. Shouldn't FinOps, financial operations, be part of this conversation? I'm assuming. I'm assuming that's what it stands for. Mark, what say you? Shouldn't they? Or Marnie? I'm sorry, Marnie. Let's go with you first.
Well, I finally processed the question. Yeah, you absolutely need to include your finance team. I think that was part of the question.
Yes,
whether FinOps should be involved.
Yes.
Yeah. What the cloud does, and Mark said this, everybody should go back and watch the teaser video also. But Mark said this before. What you can do in the cloud is get a lot more granular information about where you're spending money to actually make better informed decisions. And the finance team appreciates that and will help you. So if you are building the case and you are telling them, well, look, actually, right now we just have this big blob of we're paying this much every month and we don't actually know where it's going to or who's using most of it. If we move to the cloud, that gives us more granular data on who's using most. And it might turn out that your dev team is using most of it, and it's just because they spun up stuff and forgot about it. And being able to actually see that and shut things down and reduce that cost, the finance team can be a huge, huge advocate for you.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Mark, what have you seen?
I mean, I agree with Marnie on that point, but I think it's also similar to what we're talking about with security, is that financial decisions are now becoming part of the engineering team's decisions, right? Because if you're sitting there and looking at two different database systems, and one is a fraction of the cost of the other, but the operational toll on your team is significantly higher, the finance team doesn't have the context to make that decision, but you should. And the problem is that right now, most engineering teams aren't factoring that in. They deal with the end of the month bill and go like, oh, this is super high. And eventually if it gets high enough, then they go back. Whereas just like security, that's an easier decision to make when you're designing something and rolling it out and going like, oh, if I go route A, it's going to be, actual infrastructure costs high, but low operational costs, and the opposite the other way. And which one do we go? And that's a great question to bring to finance to say, look, actual money out the door, high, but low cost for us as engineers, so we can keep building business features, versus the opposite. And I think that's just another example of how the cloud is changing how we need to think about building from all aspects, including security. And yet a lot of people haven't taken those steps yet.
Well, and I keep hearing it that operational expenses in most cases are more attractive than capital expenses too. So that's usually what they like about that. All right, let me ask you, have the two of you come to a myth that you want to get rolling again about the cloud? Mark, you're not ready. Marty, do you have one for me?
All of the security startups that have cloud solutions will solve all of our security tooling issues in the cloud. So there are a whole bunch of startups out there. They're all going to fix all of our problems. So you should just go start bringing on all of the startups and adding them to your tool set, and you will solve all the problems.
Vendors who are on right now are really, really happy about them, and they're more than happy to promote that, in fact. What do you think? Are you on board on this one, Mark? Do you got a different one?
Yeah, I love that one. And I have a different one. I'll keep it simple. My new myth would be all clouds are completely equal for every use case.
Yes, we have discussed
that. Is awesome. Yes.
But by the way, I don't think that's a new one. That one we've definitely heard.
Yeah, I think we've seen variations of it, and it's I think it's evening out though. It's gotten away from the specifics, and I think if we keep amplifying it, we'll get there where you just go, it's one cloud, it's just cloud.
Very good point. All right, let me we got a couple more questions that have just come in. This is a good question for you, Mark, because I'm sure you deal with this a lot. Matthew Bybee, who was just on camera moments ago, how do you secure the cloud when more and more business systems and applications are hosted on multiple cloud providers, SaaS? So I have this SaaS solution, this SaaS solution, this SaaS solution. This one's on Azure, this one's on Google, this one's on AWS. What do I do?
Yeah, and I'm not going to be able to give you a clear answer because this is a huge challenge for everybody. There's, well, and the problem is I think this comes down to something that we haven't specifically addressed here, but I know, David, you and I have talked about it, and Marnie, you and I have talked about it previously too, is that we've been saying cloud, but that means very different things to very different people within your organizations, right? Yes. So some people think like Google Workspaces or Office 365. You talk to me about cloud, I tend to default to one of the big three, like an AWS or Azure or Google. But all of those are very different to the business, but they're also very different from a security perspective. And I'll tell you how you can't do it, if that helps. You're not going to find one tool that does it all. You're not going to find,
Marnie's myth may solve it.
Right.
Right. So, outside of Marnie's super startup, we've got, all the startups forming into.
That's it.
I'm going to start.
Marnie's super startup.
Yeah. Marnie is forming the Voltron of security startups. She's taking pieces from all of them to form something perfect. I see people trying to do this all the time and realize that you need to strike a balance between not too many tools, but also a couple. You don't want to go best of breed for everything because then you'll have 50 different tools, but you can't have just one. And really, it's just about figuring out what's in use and then taking reasonable steps, because you're probably going to spend most of your time figuring out what's in use as opposed to how to fix it, because I guarantee what you think is out there is probably only a fraction of what's actually out there.
All right, Marty, I'm going to have you answer this question as well, and then we're going to go to our wrap up, and then everyone stick around for our meetups. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, you're right. There is no single way to do that. My biggest recommendation is what Mark just said, make sure you know what's out there. Do the risk analysis, do the threat analysis, and make sure you understand where to spend your time. If you've got a SaaS platform, again, there are still companies out there that are like, oh my God, we can't go to the cloud. And to them, cloud means Salesforce. If you've got a SaaS platform that you're using, but it doesn't have sensitive data, why are you spending time trying to secure it? Right? Really be thoughtful about how you're doing your threat analysis and risk analysis, and spend the time on the things that are the riskiest.
All right. I'm going to do a quick wrap up thing, and then I'm going to ask for your last thoughts, what to people to go away with. If you have not clicked that link at the very bottom of the screen, do it right now, because that is going to change in 60 seconds. In 60 seconds, I want you to change that, Andrew. Let me just remind you that next Friday is going to be hacking distractions in our critical thinking of what we should stop paying attention to in security. This takes twofold, as I said before. It's what we should not be wasting our time in security, and also when we're attacked, that attackers are doing that often to distract us. Don't pay attention to this. Pay attention to this, because we're going to go mess with you over here, kind of like what a magician does. All right, stick around for our icebreaker. Go ahead, change that link at the bottom, Andrew. Right there, it's just changed. Like that, like magic. Andrew's amazing. By the way, for those of you who don't know, Andrew's joining full-time with the CISO series starting next week. I'm very thrilled to have him on board. Now, tell all your friends to join us every Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. And a huge thanks to our sponsor, Trend Micro. We greatly, greatly appreciate that. All right, now let me go back to this, and I'm going to ask both Mark and Marnie for your final thoughts. All right. We have a savvy group out here. What would be your piece of advice for them when they're dealing with this very issue in their world? Start with you, Mark. You got about 60, 90 seconds here.
Sure. I like to keep things simple. I think the biggest challenge that everybody's facing, if I can make broad sweeping statements, is that security is way too disconnected from the business, and the cloud really exposes that because of the speed at which people are moving. Right? You're doing multiple iterations, deploying all the time, and the old way of kind of sitting back and going, I'll check your work at the start, and I'll check your work at the end. It just doesn't cut it anymore. And as much as I'd love to tell you, hey, here's a magic box or a magic cloud service, and this will fix it, it's a people problem. And it starts with the security team realizing that they're part of the business, and they need to get out.
I don't have much faith in Marnie's super startup. I would just say.
I do, but I'm trying to keep the attention off the buyer time, and so that I can get in on the first round, on the angel round, so that I win too. And really to solve this problem, because it is a people problem, it starts with something as simple as connecting, when we're back in the office, going for coffee together. Until then, going out of your way to connect, set 10, 15 minutes with the key people, so that you have visibility, so that you have that connection, and good things will grow from there.
Awesome. All right, Marnie, your last piece of advice.
People, process, technology. Mark just covered people, process. Technology is not going to fix a broken process. So if you've got bad systems, if you've got bad processes, moving to the cloud or buying a shiny new tool to do some sort of security thing in the cloud for a process that's already broken on-prem, it's still not, it's just not going to work. It actually
may amplify to make it worse.
Exactly. So make sure that, again, you've got to understand what your processes are, and you have to really understand what the cloud does and doesn't do for you, and then decide how you want to go through the process of securing it. But we have to stop doing things the same way we've been doing them for the last 10 years and simply moving and applying that to the cloud. It is not going to work. Please stop doing it. And please, vendors, please you stop doing it too. That's not helping.
All right.
Hence my startup.
Interesting. There you go. That's why you're starting. It's going to be hugely successful. By the way, I forgot to also mention, if you want to sponsor one of these video chats, of which I think at the tail end of May, we may have some openings, please just contact me at david@cisoseries.com. I want to thank our guest, Mark Nunikoven, who is the VP of Cloud Research over at Trend Micro. And another huge thanks to your company, Trend Micro, for sponsoring this episode. In fact, they've been a phenomenal sponsor of the CISO series, really practically since our inception. So thank you very much. Also, Marnie Wilking, who, by the way, was my guest on the last live show that we did, Marnie.
That's right. Yeah, March
That was the last
5th
one.
last year, I think.
That
Yeah.
was the last time I was on an airplane leaving Boston at that time. She's the global head of security and technology risk management over at Wayfair. Buy your furniture over there at Wayfair. How much of furniture do you own comes from Wayfair, Marnie?
I still have an apartment in Boston that is fully furnished with Wayfair.
Okay, good. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much. We are just a few seconds from being wrapped. Thank you to you. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to everybody else. Please join us for the one-on-one meetups, the Icebreaker. It's a ton of fun if you've never been a part of it. And by the way, if for some reason you don't, you connect with someone you don't want, you can also end the conversation and start up. Anyways, just meet me over there. Takes me a few seconds to get over to the other camera. Bye. Take us out, Andrew.